Welcome back to the fourth episode of Dark Academia Queen. Today, we are going to be talking about some dating in the Regency era. Now, here's the thing I gave Bridgerton, most of you know now, I gave Bridgerton a second shot in love with the show, in love with the plot. Um, that's all I'm saying on the plot. I'm in love with it, especially in season one now. But anyway, I actually wanted to see what was some courting rules that was historically accurate in Bridgerton. And like what was some most interesting things. So I did some research. I found 30 courting rules for society. Are you that had to be followed? Okay, so the first of those rules are prospective couples were not allowed to use each other's names. It was in the early days of these courtships that couples were dissuaded from premature emotional intimacy. In the Jane Austen marriage manual, Helen Kay wrote that in addition to being prohibited from talking privately, the couples were also not allowed to not allowed to use their other given names. Rather, they would call each other Sir, Madam, Miss, Mrs., etc. until the relationship progressed. Rule number two. Friends or family often made the first introduction. Although there was a rise in public places where prospective couples could meet, the game of love in Georgian England was courtship, emotions, and material culture. Dr. Sally Halloway wrote that family and friends were still expected to formally introduce a couple before they could interact. Number three, cousins were welcome to marry. Um, So, marriages between cousins were rather common during the Regency era. And cousins were people who you've known for a long time. So you be aware of their temperament. They also be the same family background, similar upbringing, and parity of status. And a marriage between two cousins also ensured that property would remain in the family. Number four, the season had to coincide with Parliament sessions. The season, prominently featured on Bridgerton, typically runs winter and spring when Parliament was in town. There were balls, assemblies, dinners, and other social events that they would attend every night during this period, which was dubbed a quote marriage market unquote for the elite and women, rank and marriage in the British aristocracy from that was really so. Number five, singles were encouraged to meet in assembly rooms. Society's most eligible came from Almec's assembly room to dance and socialize. In his memoirs, and society reporters, He's Howell Gunner also called Almec's the seventh heaven of the fashionable world. And these events were typically invitation only and had strict dress codes. Number six, high ranking society women created a guest list. Grano wrote that the gates were guarded by ladies patronesses whose smiles and frowns was consigned in men of the happiness and despair. Now, singles were expected to dance with multiple partners, and according to the National Geographic, it was also common for dancers to change partners after every dance. So, um, very interesting. Number eight, men were the only ones allowed to ask a woman to dance, but there was a catch. When men were responsible for asking these women to dance, a woman's friend and family could step in by telling a man she was interested in dancing with him. Per National Geographic, women had the right to refuse a man's invitation to dance. Number nine, skin could not touch before marriage. This meant that even while dancing, gloves had to be worn. Dancing was most physically intimate and a couple could be before they were engaged. Number 10, women sent secret messages with fans. So, according to the National Trust of Scotland, carrying your fan in your left hand, for example, meant you will wish to make acquaintance for the person whom you waved at. But drawing the fan across your forehead meant that your admirer was were being you were being watched by someone. Other messages, including drawing fans through your face, indicating that you hated the person for whom you were conversing, whereas sliding or pressing the fan against your face to your cheek to signal that you loved them. Number 11. Love letters were only sent if the relationship was getting serious. So exchanging correspondence was a sign that the relationship was headed toward engagement. Men had to send formal requests in order to pen love letters to their intended. Not only did the letters represent heightened emotional intimacy, but also physical closeness. In the game of love, Holloway said that courting men would carry love letters around in their pockets, touching them and kissing them. Number 12. Men typically got emotional in the letters. So, according to Holloway, men's letters were ruminated at enormous lengths about the nature of love, the depth of their feelings, and many other poems. So, why were men so vulnerable to these open letters? But it was a man's responsibility to secure a match. They needed to ensure the intended they knew how serious they were. So, what's rule number 13? Well, these letters seldomly remained private, and although men bared their hearts out in the letters, they could not expect them to stay private. Number 14. Gifts needed to be timed to courtship stages. And according to National Geographic, gifts were seen as an integral part of the courtship process. Men typically gave everything from books to perfume to jewelry. And although they needed the concisement of giving gifts that were appropriate for the stage of courtship, they also needed to be good in good condition. If flowers were willing or food was stale, it was a signal to the woman that the suitor was careless. Number 15. Women could also give gifts, but they couldn't be bought. And while men typically gave more upscale gifts, women were the one known for gifting homemade objects ranging from ruffles to handkerchiefs. While with their hair woven in. In fact, hair was a popular item to the gift. Hair to ki- so people also talked in their letters about taking locks of their hair to bed with them and kissing them, talking to it as if it was an absent lover. Number 16. Valentines were common and involved. Now, in 18th century, suitors were afraid to get creative when with them, and historians at the National Women's Museum, History Museum, were uncovered love letters and puzzles of intricacy folded in recipients so they could discover a new love message every time they unfolded the page. Number 17. Singles sometimes turned to newspaper ads to find love. The first ever personal ad was believed to have been published in 1727. So by the time of the Regency, they were increasingly common. According to Longbreath, people, both men and women, placed personal ads in newspapers, lifting their qualities to find their partner. These were usually kept anonymous for the sake of reputation. Um, Personal ads were also used by widows, divorced people, and those trapped in a loveless marriage. Rule number 18. Post breakup couples were expected to return every gift they gifted each other. This was done in an attempt to make breakups emotionless as possible. Although there had been evidence of couples burning correspondence, it was much more common to simply give it back. Number 19, men were expected to end their relationship. Ooh. Yeah. You could, yeah, if you could tell by the tone of my voice how I feel about that one. A man was expected to end a courtship as cleanly as quickly as possible if he found it was impossible to marry. So, number 20, divorce was rarely allowed. In the Game of Love, Holloway wrote that divorce required an act of parliament. Not only was ending a marriage frowned upon, but legal proceedings typically got extremely complicated. Plus, not to mention at this time, not to mention, like, if you had kids with that person, they were considered the man's property. Um, which leads to number 21. A woman's family will spare no expense to impress male suitors. In fact, they were typically willing to spend beyond their means in order to secure a suitor's affection. Um, because men were often shunned if they chose to marry below their social status. It was important for a woman's family to prove their worthiness. Number 22. Obedience was expected from women. Also had to, you guys know? Yeah, tell by my tone. But according to Holloway, total obedience was expected of a woman in this era, especially when it came to romantic endeavors. Women were told to listen intently, grant men their full attention, and not speak too much. Number 23. But men had the power of refusal, and although men were expected to make the first move, generally had the upper hand throughout the duration of their relationship, women had one important tool during their courtship, the power of refusal. And according to PBS, women of the Regency were able to stand their ground. Um, they were able to stand their ground by turning down invitations to dance, declining proposals, and refusing to accept correspondence. Number 24, men married later than women. The average marriage for men was 26, while women typically wed around age 24. Men were often expected to travel and see the world before coming home to settle down. They were also allowed to be sexually intimate with other women before marriage. Although historians at the University of Warwick says these women were not considered marriage material, they were held as to looser standards. Rule number 25. A couple needed a chaperone for every date. No matter how long the couple had been involved, the chaperone needed to be present at all times. Chaperones were typically older women, often family members or close friends. But couples sneaking away to have some and but this leads us to number 26. But couples sneaking away for a long time wasn't unheard of. So, according to Holloway, she was a couple seized opportunity to snatch some alone time together. And that we had plenty of examples of couples letters where they described themselves as sneaking off to the back parlor to steal kisses in great amusement from the family. Now number 27. Courtships could last for years, and according to National Geographic, courtships could last anywhere from 7 months to 4 years. No, the longer one lasted engaged, the riskier it was for a woman's reputation, in the event that the couple did not ultimately marry. Number 28. Um, Scandals were fodder for gossip and even court battles. Some of the biggest marriage scandals of the Regency era are included a couple eloping, a woman getting left at the altar, or unengaged couples that call it being intimate. Holloway told National Geographic for those scandals were not only gossiped about, but it was also used in court. Number 29. Marriage settlements had to be placed before an engagement. In the book Love and Marriage in the Age of Jane Austen, historian Rory Muir but that although all the marriage settlements included the parameters, they were essential before a couple could proceed with marriage. New settlements covered things like inheritance rights and financial provisions in the event a wife was left widowed. And finally, number 30. Couples often became physical after their engagement. Although couples were technically expected to wait until their wedding day to be sexually intimate, Holloway told National Geographic that many couples saw engagement as a sign that they were headed down the aisle to allow for increased intimacy. Once the engagement was secure, there might be time for you to move for greater sexual freedom. And during this era, up to 1 to 3 brides were pregnant at their wedding. Um, since I also want to talk about the Regency era, some Regency era women at this time. Um, the first one is Ada Byron King, the Countess of Lovelace. She was the daughter of the famous bad boy poet Lord Byron, though she never knew her father, and as her father parents separated soon after her birth. As a child, she showed a remarkable talent for mathematics, and at the age of 12, she was she had dreamed of building a mechanical steam powered flying horse and soaring through the heavens by the age of 18. The scientific world recognized the genius with numbers. After her marriage to William King and later the Earl of Lovelace, Ada worked with Charles Babbage, the famous inventor of the difference machine, and analytical engine, the precursors to the modern computer. They brainstormed together a mathematical problem, and be, they be, and she and Babbage called her the Enchantress of Numbers. Indeed, Ada's notes on calculating sequence of Bernoulli's numbers of the machine credited her with being the first computer program. Today, the U.S. Department of Defense has named one of the programs, ADA, in her honor. Next, I'm going to talk about Mary Anning. So, Mary Anning was digging up fossils from the sea cliff around her home in Lyme Regis at the age of 12 to help support her family. And collecting these collecting had become popular among the wealthy tourists. And Anna showed the uncanny knack for finding spectacular specimens. Her interest would become intellectual as well as financial. Fascinated by the extraordinary wealth and form that was preserved in the stones, she began to carefully preserve um, and um, cataloging her finds. And she would open a shop that would become known throughout the scientific world. As she gained confidence for herself, knowledge, she began writing articles for scientific journalists. And despite her lack of formal training, she is considered one of the pioneers in paleontology. Now, the Royal Geographic Society eventually recognized her accomplishments by making her an honorary fellow. Next, we have Mary Shelley. Does this one really need an intro? Really? But anyway, Mary was born to be a Hellion rebellion. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, and the writer and philosopher who penned A Vindication of Right of Women to be considered one of the first feminist treaties. And her father, William Goodwin, was also a philosopher and held equally radical notions about society. Mary received a broad minded education, which encouraged to think for herself. Spirited and headstrong, she fell in love at the age of 16 with the famous poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, who was married, and they eloped to Europe. Mary devoted herself to writing as well. She penned her most famous work while summering in Lake Genova with her husband Love Byron. Can we guess her most famous work? If you haven't, you've been living under a rock, I'm telling you. Frankenstein. And she displayed her fearlessness, imagination, and keen understanding of human nature, which have made its way into classics in the English literature, and hint, hint, a possible episode maybe, because hey, she deserves a spot, honestly. She also deserves to be on my Women Making History Instagram page as well. Next on our list is Caroline Herschel. Caroline was a tiny woman, but she looms largely in astronomy. She was born in Germany and she came to England to keep house with her brother William, who had been appointed king's astronomer to George III. We're gonna talk about that one later. In later episodes and before episode. But they moved to the observatory near her house in the Slough, and Caroline soon began helping him build powerful lenses and learn to sweep the skies of telescopes, studying the stars and helping to record their complex and calculations of the area. William is credited with discovering the planet Uranus, but Caroline earned her own place in the scientific firmament by discovering no less than 8 major comets and meticulously cataloging countless stars. In 1828, she was awarded the gold medal from the Royal Ast- ugh, Astronomical Society for her work. Next on our list, we have Lady Hester Stanhope. Hester was the daughter of an earl who lived who lived an early life with privileged world of aristocracy. As a young woman, she went to live with her bachelor uncle William Pitt. The younger, who was Britain's prime minister, who served as a social hostess, her beauty, poise, wit, and charm, and the beau mode of cleverness caused Pitt to ask her to serve as his private secretary. When Pitt died, she turned her back on the Life of Leisure convention and embarked on an adventurous journey to the Middle East, where she became fascinated with ancient history. And after studying old documents, her curiosity led her to explore historical sites. And she was accredited with doing one um, of the first astrological excavations in Palestine. Her exploits became legendary, and she refused to wear a veil dress and her men's trouser and flowing robes. In her may carry sense, the adventure of curiosity made it international celebrity. And lastly, do I even need to say this one? But I guess I have to. Jane Austen. Jane possessed a remarkable talent for observation and understanding the fallables of human nature, and I had to say she's the perfect inspiration for the Regency sloop. But Stephanie Barron had already beat her. But Stephanie Barron had already decided that pinning her a delightful historical mystery series starring Indomitable Jane. Um, but that is it for this episode. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have a great day. Tell me what y'all think. Like, what was some of those courting rules that shocked you? Like, could you have courted in this time period? I'm very curious.